Hey y'all, welcome back for another flipped video. Today we're going to be talking about the Industrial Revolution. After the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment, people were starting to do things in different ways, which led to a lot of new machines that would lead to new industrial and improvements and more just easier ways of doing things. In this video, the essential questions that we're going to be focusing on were what technological advances influenced the Industrial Revolution? How did the Industrial Revolution affect society? Golden Hawk historians will summarize and evaluate the different technological innovations during the Industrial Revolution and their influence on the success of the Industrial Revolution, and analyze the impact of the Industrial Revolution on society. While you're watching, make sure that you're taking notes in either Cornell or outline format as we've talked about in class. It's okay if you have to pause or rewind the video to make sure that you're taking good notes. For centuries previously to this, people had used human and animal power as their main energy source. But during the Second Industrial Revolution, they replaced human and animal power with steam and electricity. The Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain because Great Britain had a myriad of factors that came together to make Great Britain the place to start. The first thing was that they had a large access to raw materials. The colonization that had happened during the Age of Exploration left them with a lot of raw materials. They also had a large merchant fleet to export their goods. Their government passed laws to benefit business, and then private businesses were supporting innovative ideas and inventions. There was also an agricultural revolution during this time period in which machines replaced humans and animals on the farm. Farmers experimented with new methods of planting and invented machines to make farming easier, and they also began enclosing their farms to make the farms larger and more efficient. There were essential elements that were created a productive environment for industry. These were called factors of production. They were land, labor, and capital. Land meant the availability of natural resources. That included nations' ability to gain access to coal, water, and other methods that powered their industries. Labor meant the availability of workers, including a large population. Capital meant money or skills that were used to invest in businesses. That meant both private investors and people with skills that could advance business in a particular way. Previously to the Industrial Revolution, the British and other countries had been hand-weaving cotton in cottage industries. Cottage industries were used for other industries as well, such as crafts and baskets and shoes and tailors. After the Industrial Revolution, factories began being built that were buildings that housed industrial machines, and they became a popular place for people to work and develop products to sell. The industries used steam to power steam engines, which could be used in many different capacities. Cotton mills used the steam engine to run the mill looms, which increased the amount of cloth they were able to make. Overall, steam engines made goods quicker and more efficient. But the steam required wood to be burned in order for the water to be heated and to be created into steam. And so a lot of trees were being cut down, so people started turning to coal instead. As coal became the most popular fuel source, coal mining also became more popular, providing more jobs. Factories started to mass produce goods or make products in large amounts through the use of interchangeable parts. Interchangeable parts are identical parts that were used for one product. This made goods easier to make and cheaper. Britain was fiercely protective of their industry secrets and started creating laws to forbid anyone from taking their machines, the blueprints, or any of the skilled craftsmen even from leaving the country. They were the only industrialized nation. However, Samuel Slater eventually traveled to the United States and started spreading the knowledge of the steam-powered machines. A couple of main people that were really big inventors during this time period was Michael Faraday, who discovered the connection between magnetism and electricity to allow for the invention of electrical devices. Thomas Edison then was able to create the first light bulb. Electrical power improved factories because now they are able to get rid of steam and coal and light their buildings for longer. The Bessemer process also allowed for steel to be made stronger and cheaper, and that led to more things being made out of steel, including trains and buildings. Due to the increase in the availability of steel, railroads also became more widespread that connected various parts of the world and made shipping cheaper and more efficient. During this time period as well, Henry Ford created the first automobile called the Model T using interchangeable parts in the assembly line, which was a line in which people would take the interchangeable parts off the line and then put the finished product back on the line. Wilbur and Orville Wright were the first ones to fly the first airplane, and eventually that would lead to the invention of fuel-powered airplanes that would be able to carry cargo, people, and also other things. Communication-wise, the telegraph was invented by Samuel Morse, who allowed for messages to be sent instantly over wires. He created also Morse code, which was the language used to transmit messages. The telegraph was kind of similar to text messaging. Alexander Graham Bell invented the first telephone, which allowed for individuals to have more access to instantaneous communication that was also a lot more private than the telegraph. Charles Darwin became the father of the evolution following his trip to the Galapagos, where he studied plants and animals. He came up with the idea of natural selection, or that creatures adapt to their environment in order to survive. He argued that due to natural selection, species evolve over time and adapt to their environments, and this included everything from turtles to human beings. In addition to this time period, one of the most best medical inventions was antiseptics. Joseph Lister, who you might be familiar with Listerine, created an antiseptic to clean wounds and tools to prevent the spread of disease-causing bacteria. Also in this time period, modern hospitals started to be invented and built so that they could allow for diseases to be quarantined. Before factories, a lot of the work occurred in the cottage industries and homed, but this led to a lot of houses to burn down because the fire was used to power the machines. Many families depended heavily on their children to do the labor necessary for their businesses. Following the Industrial Revolution, factory laborers had learned that separate, easily learned tasks allowed for adults and children to work as well. With the interchangeable parts, you no longer needed a skilled person to create one product. Factory work was pretty dangerous, though, and there was a lot of ways for people to hurt themselves within the machines, and there was no laws in order to keep them safe. Many of the work days were long, and they could be up to 12 hours long for children and for women and for men. Towns grew up along where the factories were when people moved to look for work, and there was a new social hierarchy that formed. Wealthy businessmen who started the factories were at the top. Then they had their white-collar supervisors, and then finally the blue-collar workers were at the bottom, and they were the laborers that ran the machines. As people began to move to the cities and the population grew in towns and cities, this became known as urbanization, or creating more urban areas. Factories preferred hiring women and children because they were cheaper than men, and they also were much better at taking orders than men were. The factory conditions could be very harsh, though, and there were very few laws that regulated the industries. Workers started forming groups that they called labor unions that would advocate on the behalf of the workers to the government. When the workers went on strike, in which they stopped working, they tried to convince the employers to raise wages and do other things that they thought would be beneficial to their workplace. As a result of labor unions, the British government eventually was able to make laws that required children to be at least 9 years old in order to work in the factories, and it also limited the work hours that they had. The Factory Act of 1833 limited the working hours of children and required that children who worked also had to go to school. There's also new ideas that formed out of this Industrial Revolution. Laissez-faire economics by Adam Smith was the idea that the government should not interfere in any business affairs, and thus spread rapidly during the Industrial Revolution. As more individual business owners started to spread, they did not want the government to interfere in their business practices. Laissez-faire economics allowed for a free market economy to form in which businesses were free to compete with one another, allowing them to lower and raise prices and also benefit the consumer with those prices. However, not everyone believed in laissez-faire economics, and they didn't think it was beneficial to society. So two other economic ideas also emerged during this time period. Socialism, which was created by Robert Owen, argued that society or the government should own the vast majority of the property and control industry rather than individuals. Communism, which was an idea mainly by Karl Marx, argued that the government should own all the means of production and control economic planning. After you finish this video, make sure that you read back over your notes and that you have all the necessary vocabulary. Thank you for joining me for this lesson, and I'll see you in class.